Good morning. Teachers, right? Comics, graphic novels. Let's get this conference started, right? Like everyone else in this room, I grew up loving to read. I just took a wrong turn somewhere. I can think of two books specifically that really, in sequence, stopped or kind of turned my direction. Oh, thank you, Kathy. I mean, I read all the same things most kids read, you know, Sherlock Holmes, Tarzan, whatever the books are, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. But two books that really stood out for me, that kind of turned me from, you know, being a reader to actually wanting to be a writer, were first Huckleberry Finn. Let me see if this is going to work here. And Huckleberry Finn represents a kind of story that I've found that I've been really drawn to and that I kind of try to write. And that's the idea of a sort of like a boy's adventure story that starts off, you know, just fun. You know, Huck and Jim are, you know, trying to escape the law, and they're riding a raft. But as the story goes on, the story becomes a little more complex, a little more sophisticated. The issues that it's dealing with are not necessarily just for kids. That's a kind of story that really intrigues me and always has. The other book is Moby Dick. And that's a really cool painting of Moby Dick, by the way. I read this a little later. This was probably in high school was the first time I read Moby Dick, and I read it like 4 times since then. But this is a different kind of a book. I mean, it's the same kind of idea, stripped down. It's an adventure story. Starts off, they're just in the high seas, they're whaling, but it becomes more than that. And this book is filled with symbolism. It just has layers of metaphors and meaning. And every time I read it, as I grow up and get older, I find new meaning in different scenes. So these are two kinds of books that just really appealed to me, especially in terms of literary structure. But the stuff I really liked to read was Peanuts. Well, here comes old Charlie Brown. Good old Charlie Brown. Yes, sir. Good old Charlie Brown. How I hate him. This is actually the very first Peanuts strip from 1950. For me, growing up in the 60s, there wasn't much I could relate to. I wasn't, you know, television, the networks were pretty square. There was like the mainstream media, you know, Look magazine, Time magazine. That didn't mean anything to me as a kid. Television commercials were stupid. Even as a kid, I could tell they were stupid. Oh, you got to get rid of your dandruff. Oh, God. You know, your breath smells. You know, buy our product. Even as a kid, it just meant nothing to me. The only thing that was real to me were comics. Charlie Brown talked about what it was like to be humiliated. You know, I mean, and it was so simple and brilliant. Just 2 dots for an eye and a little squiggle mouth, and you knew that Charlie Brown, his stomach hurt, and you knew what that was like. And that was actually, you know, nobody talked about stuff like that in the 60s, especially in a comic strip, one that's supposedly about kids. And it works on 2 levels. You know, this is, in some ways, this is just the same way adults act, right? Which is really what the joke is. But, you know, Charlie Brown goes on where they talk about, you know, what it's like to be a kid, and that was real. That was one of the only places you could really see real stuff, except for Mad. Mad was all about the truth. That was the place I could find adults telling me what adults were doing. They are tricking you and lying to you about, you know, products and advertisements. They were irreverent. They were unafraid to just talk the truth, and they'd never talk down to kids. So Mad was one of those things that could be read by adults and by children, just like Peanuts, and just like Huckleberry Finn, actually.